Welcome to the 10th chapter of Raising Rebeca Books, the birth of a publishing house. This is the audio story of me, Rebecca Seitz, building a traditional, royalty-paying publishing house from the ground up, told to you as it unfolds. When last I checked in with you, we were days away from the inaugural gathering of Rebeca Books authors. That happened on June 5th at Champions for Learning, who were very kind in allowing us to use their space. If you're wanting to find a group that is achieving serious, lasting impact in people's lives via the public education system, go to championsforlearning.org. Now, you might remember that I was a little nervous about gathering that much power and ability into one room. As I said on the previous episode, the women of Rebeca Books are each stunning and incredible in their own right. They are present, inquisitive and insightful, brave and welcoming, knowledgeable, and yet curious. They are each walking billboards for the spectacular magic that happens when a woman comes into her own. I got to the venue about an hour before the event was set to begin, which of course means that it ended up starting without me. Let me explain.
You're listening to Raising Rebeca Books, the birth of a publishing house on the 1C Story Network. 1C is made possible in part by the support of the following sponsor.
If you are insane enough to say yes to a big idea and then start walking out its fruition, I can make you a promise. The people that are on page 1 will not be the ones in the final chapter. I mean, a few may stick with you through the entire crazy journey, but in my experience of founding multiple enterprises over the past 20 years, I found that, like in my personal life, professional relationships have their seasons. This is an expected part of the process. In my early years, I would lose sleep trying to figure out if I'd done something wrong or not done something needed if someone left the story before the final chapter. I took it personally as a slight against my ability to build and manage a team, to consistently inspire and lead. Now I know that certain pages of a story, well, they're allotted to certain people, and I'm able to keep my hands a little more loosely on the unfolding manuscript. Do you know what I mean? I've learned how to make sure that the people who are working with me know I am always open to communication, and I respect their right and responsibility to make decisions for where and how they spend their time, talents, and resources. So long as I'm doing that, there's a peace that accompanies whatever happens. This approach often lets relationships evolve and continue rather than end with any single incarnation of them. That's a byproduct that I place a significant amount of value on. I enjoy and appreciate longevity of relationship, and I mourn the severing of it, even when parting is necessary. I say all that to say this. Back in Chapter 8 of this podcast, you listened in on a conversation between Crystal Canny and me. Crystal was serving as the first executive director of the nonprofit Rebeca Collective, which is wholly separate from my company. Some of the work that happens here at 1C, though, including the work of Rebeca Books, crosses over with Retta's mission of elevating the voices of women, minorities, and rural community members in the multimedia landscape. That makes sense, given that I'm the founding president of Rebeca Collective. I did help name it after my great-great-aunt Retta Moultrie, who taught me how to serve people and live as a story person. Well, on May 31st, 5 days before the gathering of Rebeca Books authors, Crystal unexpectedly resigned her position. The reasons for that are hers to tell. I will say here that starting up a nonprofit is very hard work. I know. I've done it myself in the past, and it was more difficult than I'd envisioned going into it. Harder than I think I could have known, having never done it before. So there I was, 5 days before the Rebeca Books women gathered, and 4 days before the first one's plane arrived in town, suddenly needing to handle the exit of the Retta Collective executive director. As its founding president, I'd been donating and managing all the website design, URL management, email system management, office contract, graphic design, and collateral creation, and helping introduce the concept to key relationships for the ED to then run with. Now, access to everything had to be altered. People had to be informed. Online and print collateral had to be edited. It was a lot of work, and absolutely zero time had been budgeted for it. There were legal questions, too, and the attorney on the Retta Collective board happened to be tied up in court that day and the following days after the resignation. He ended up being able to call me 10 minutes before the start of the Rebeca Books author gathering. 10 minutes, friend. 10 minutes. Now, if you've worked in broadcasting, as I have many, many moons ago, then you know that 10 minutes is an eternity. You can rewrite an entire broadcast segment twice in 10 minutes if you have to. So, stepping out of the room that was filling up with writers, I took the call. As quickly as possible, the attorney and I ran through what I'd already done, what remained to be done, and how it needed to be handled. Behind me, on the other side of the wall, I could hear laughter and conversation begin to flow amongst the writers. The call lasted 17 minutes. So I entered the room 7 minutes after our start time. And what I found made me stop and just stare. The women of Rebeca Books, previously unknown to each other, were talking, laughing, gesturing, and already finding points of connection. I just stood there, staring, drinking in the energy of the moment, which pulsed with life, vitality, camaraderie, freedom, and possibility. I didn't really want to interrupt it. But one of the women saw me, and she said, "Oh, there she is." So I needed to start our time together, and I did so in what, for me, is true fashion, with an apology. I briefly explained that the ED of Retta had resigned, and I'd been waiting on that call from the attorney on the board, and I had to take it. I thanked them for their grace, and then I launched into the program. We went over the contract. Each woman introduced herself and her project, and when each one was done, can I tell you the coolest thing that happened? As a woman would finish her summary of her project, immediately the others chimed in with their admiration and excitement for how that book will serve people well. They affirmed each other as writers, as professionals, as women taking up space in this world. When I tell you it felt like the best therapy session that I've ever been to, I'm not exaggerating. Nobody said out loud, "Okay, we're a group now and we're going to be here for each other." They just did it. They started supporting each other with words, with energy and deed from before I ever entered the room 7 minutes late, and they kept it going the entire time we were there. Actually, they've kept it going in our group chat ever since. Maybe you've been a part of this kind of a group before, but I have not. It's magical, restorative, energizing. I mean, each of these women came into my life, and I did choose them to be an inaugural Rebeca Books author, yes. My friendship with each of them has been those things individually, magical and restorative and energizing. But when you put those kinds of individual souls in a room together, it takes the experience to entirely new heights, because collectively creating and experiencing magic, restoration, and energy is next level. By the end of the day, I could tell we were all beginning to need a break from words and new experiences. As I packed up my materials, took pictures with the women, and said my goodbyes, one of them came up to me. "Hey, can we talk about what exactly Retta Collective needs in an executive director?" she asked. And you'll be meeting that wise woman in Chapter 11. For now, I'm Rebecca Seitz. Thank you for joining me on this journey.
You've been listening to Raising Rebeca Books, the birth of a publishing house from the 1C Story Network. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and learn more at RebecaBooks.com. That's REBECA books.com.
The 1C Story Network, for the love of stories.